right, we are here to read the Ghost Stories book. And the section we left off on is called Lively Ghosts in a Wisconsin Home. So let's get started. Brad Steiger's investigation of a haunted house. In 1970, I was among a number of researchers who accompanied the well-known psychic slash sensitive and spirit medium Irene Hughes of Chicago to a very large home in Wisconsin that was afflicted by a wide range of haunting phenomena. From early reports, it seemed as though everything from dolls to dishes might become instantly transformed into ghostly guided missiles that would often pell to the occupants of the home but never seriously injure anyone. When we arrived at the home on a Saturday in October, we were at once impressed by the size of the sprawling abode. According to some sketchy information that we had been given, the mansion had once belonged to an old lumber baron who had a rather dark reputation. We had only been on the premises for a few minutes and had just begun to interview the lady of the house when I excused myself to use the restroom. Interestingly enough, on the way to the restroom, I ran into an obvious cold spot, a center of ghostly energy that is always many degrees cooler than the temperature in the rest of the house, but its significance soon diminished in comparison with the subsequent development. While I was in the restroom, I could clearly hear the sound of what I believed to be the youngest girl of the family playing with her doll. She was singing a tuneless little song, the kind of melodic chant that appears to be universal with children, especially it seems with little girls at play. From time to time, she would interrupt the humming of her sing-song to speak lovingly to her doll, and then she would call rather loudly for her mother. Then, when there was no response from her mother, she would return to her playing and singing. As a father of two girls who at that time were 5 and 2, I fashioned a mental image of a little girl dressing her doll, combing its hair, creating her own world of imagination. I could clearly determine that the sound was coming from upstairs almost directly above me. When I rejoined the group, I excused myself for interrupting the conversation in progress, announced with some excitement that I had found a cold spot, then with additional apologies for setting forth what may have been an already asked question, I inquired of the woman just how many children there were in the house at that time. She replied that she had 3 children, a son in his late teens who was often too frightened to come home and sometimes stayed with a friend, a teenage daughter in high school who lived at home, and a 6-year-old girl, the only child whom she had had by her second and present husband. When I asked to meet any children who might be home on that Saturday afternoon, the woman said that she had sent her 2 daughters over to a friend's home. I thought that you would rather work without the interruption or the presence of children, she said. Irene Hughes told her she had done the right thing, that our investigation would quite likely proceed much smoother without the presence of the children. By now I was really puzzled. If our hostess had thoughtfully sent her children to a friend's home, who was the little girl playing upstairs? The woman blanched slightly and shifted uneasily in her chair after I asked my question. My little girl is at a friend's house, she said firmly. Then you'd better go upstairs and have a chat with her, I said. She has apparently returned home. I clearly heard her in a room upstairs. Upstairs, the woman echoed, her hand clasped in the arm of a friend whom she had asked to be present for support. You heard a little girl upstairs. I was by now becoming quite aware that the members of this family had a great deal of difficulty with their upstairs, and that the woman sincerely believed her daughter to be at a friend's home. But by my ears had heard too clearly the sounds of a little girl sing-song voice. I could. I'm reading this at night, so it's kind of hard to see, and I don't feel like turning on the light. I could not be so easily convinced that I had heard anything out of the ordinary. Surely nothing supernatural. A little girl. I hate those. I hate saying those two words together. Little girl. A little girl. I assumed little girl. Just the way it is. A little girl. A little girl. I am not going to start over. It's late. A little girl. I assume your to be your daughter is upstairs. I said. I heard her playing and singing. My little girl could not be upstairs, the woman answered. Softly, it was obvious that she was struggling to maintain control of her fear, trying not to permit her dread of the unknown to warp the sound of her voice. Why is this? Okay, she's afraid to go upstairs alone. She would never go upstairs. Upstairs where? She seemed unable to complete her sentence, and her trembling hand brought a coffee cup to her lips. Upstairs is where most of the weird things happen in this house, her friend said, taking up the thread of the statement. About the little girl. Did you hear it calling its mother? I acknowledged that I had. From time to time, she would pause in her play and call for mother, the woman continued to explain. They often wake up in the middle of the night or in the morning and hear that little girl calling for its mother. But whenever they check the kids, they find them all around, all sound asleep. Although the story was eerie and told convincingly, I still required a personal exploration of the upstairs, the attic, the basement, and the yard to persuade me that there was no actual physical, real live little girl somewhere. Okay, let me get over that in that home. Once I had thoroughly searched the house, I conceded as gracefully as I could that our hostess was indeed telling the truth when she had told us that her little daughter was nowhere on the premises. If I truly heard what I believe that I heard in that Wisconsin home, then I either heard the sound of some lost and confused spirit child eternally singing and occasionally calling for its mother, or I heard some ethereal kind of phonograph record eternally reproducing the sounds of a little girl who had once lived in that house. However one might theorize about a haunting, the obvious truth of the matter was that the manifestations in that home constituted a persistent living nightmare for its occupants. The woman who appeared almost to be suffering psychic battle fatigue from her constant confrontation with the paranormal incidents in her home, and she would not walk in any area of the house other than the kitchen and the living room without someone at her side. We explored the basement, wherein she had so often heard heavy footsteps, thuddings, and scrapings. We visited each of the upstairs rooms and discovered 2 additional cold spots. We ventured up the attic, where the family had so often heard the sound of heavy objects being dragged across the dusty floor. As we opened the door, we caught sight of a wispy something, retreating to a darkened corner of the cluttered storage area. However, none of our investigating party could swear with certainty that what we had seen was a ghost or an ectoplasmic spirit and not simply a floating bit of cobweb reflecting the sunlight. Irene Hughes offered many psychic impressions as we walked from room to room. The woman of the house gave immediate feedback to the medium's comments, and in nearly all cases, she credited her with correct hits. As we walked through the house, We were we were treated to an occasional object that suddenly became airborne without any apparent physical cause for its levitation. These were small objects, mostly children's toys, such as an alphabet block, a plastic dish, and a little doll that had been made from a stocking. However, this particular haunting turned out to be even more complex than we had anticipated. There seemed to be factors working within the mother's own psyche that may have been physically finding the phenomena psychically. The teenage daughter would often find her room in disarray when she returned home from school, and she noted that this bit of mischief would occur most often after a morning when she had taken careful pains to straighten up her room before leaving home. On the other hand, as if she were to leave her room in a mess, she would find that some invisible helping hands had set the bedroom in order for her, right down to the last curler and comb in its proper place. The phenomena seemed to be centered in the second floor in the attic, and the family reported that they often heard the sounds of something heavy being dragged across the floor. Although the house was quite large, the entire family circle, which was composed of father, mother, and 3 children, aged 19 to 6, slept in 2 rooms downstairs. No one slept upstairs. On occasion, the mother told us the teenage daughter would adamantly announce that she was not going to be driven from her room and would often sleep alone upstairs for as long as 2 to 3 weeks. Then the sound of mumbled half words about her ears and the stroking of invisible fingers against her cheeks and hair would drive her back downstairs to join the rest of the family in the relative quiet of the 2 back bedrooms on the first floor. The other center of the haunting appeared to be located in the basement. The phenomena in the eerie area under the house consisted primarily of knockings, stompings, and the sound of footsteps running down the stairs and shuffling across the floor. Certainly the most dramatic manifestation of the haunting was the materialization of 4 skeletons in one of the upstairs bedrooms. After appearing in startling blood-red color, the skeletal figures would slowly manifest themselves into what appeared to be solid 3-dimensional representations of a man, 2 women, and a little girl. Each of the images appeared in period dress of what appeared to be fashions in vogue around the time of the 1890s. Once the entities had fully materialized, a bizarre ethereal drama would unfold before any witness who might be present to observe the phenomenon. And the ghost of a lovely long-haired blonde girl sat playing idly with her dolls. The man in the spectral reenactment strangled one of the women while the other stood by with a pleased expression of immense satisfaction. Over the years, various prior inhabitants of the house and other individuals who had witnessed the grim spirit portrayal had assumed that the haunting might very well have been set into motion by a tragic playing out of the eternal triangle. The ghastly tragic playing out of the eternal triangle. The ghastly reenactment seemed to be telling those shocked persons who had witnessed the grisly performance that at some time in the past the man of the house had strangled his wife to please his mistress. Some cursory historical research and an examination of local folklore revealed a scandal regarding a lady of the house who had disappeared without a trace and a husband who had remarried after an extremely brief period of grieving. Local legend had it that the wife had been murdered by her husband and her body dumped into the nearby Mississippi River so that he might marry his mistress. Although we were denied the dramatic reenactment during our visit to the home, the present occupants claimed to have witnessed the horrid pageant play in what had been their master bedroom immediately after they had moved into the mansion. Since the awful night, they had relocated their sleeping quarters downstairs, never to return again to the upstairs. There was no immediate exorcism of spirit or entity that afternoon and evening of our first visit to the home, but after we conducted an in-depth counseling session with Mrs. Hughes and made a number of return visits to the place, the psychic storm that had swirled through the household was finally diminished. However, we did learn that the family eventually decided to leave the place to the very lively ghosts and move out. The last time I checked on the mansion in 1976, it remained unoccupied. Ooh, you have a sneak preview of the next one called the Amityville Horror Revisited. See you later.